Hi, I'm Ravi Best, and you're listening to The Other Side of the Bell.
Hello, and welcome to The Other Side of the Bell, a podcast dedicated to everything trumpet, brought to you by Bob Reeves Brass. We'll help you take your trumpet playing to the next level. I'm John Snell, and I'll be your host for this episode. Joining me today is trumpeter Marie Speziale. We'll get to Marie's interview here in a moment after a word from our sponsor and some trumpet news. Today's episode is brought to you by Bob Reeves Brass, who share your passion for creating extraordinary music. You know that feeling when your instrument just clicks and the music flows effortlessly? That's what Bob Reeves Brass has been helping customers do since 1968. We've helped brass musicians like you achieve their dreams by ensuring their equipment is always in perfect harmony. We know you want to immerse yourself in the art of music making, and we're here to remove any barriers between you and your creative vision. Bob Reeves Brass is truly your one-stop shop for everything you need to fuel your passion and create music that touches hearts and souls. So go ahead, let us help you elevate your sound to new heights. Don't wait another moment to elevate your musical journey with Bob Reeves Brass. Connect with us at bobreeves.com, shoot us an email at info@bobreeves.com, and keep up with the latest news on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter at Bob Reeves Brass. Embrace your passion for music and let Bob Reeves Brass be your partner in creating the extraordinary. Well, as I have warned in previous episodes, we are getting into silly season or travel season, depending on how you look at it. We have in a couple weeks the International Women's Brass Conference in Hartford, Connecticut at the Hart School. And the dates for that, May 21st to 24th. If you're interested in getting a valve alignment at the booth during that conference, you can go to bobreeves.com/IWBC. We'll also have some guard bags. We'll have plenty of mutes. For your other brass friends, we'll have our trombone and horn mouthpieces, as well as the full line of trumpet mouthpieces. So if you have any of your other brass section mates coming, let them know to come by the Bob Reeves Brass booth. So look forward to being out there. Virtuosity Music from Boston will be next to us. So we're going to have, between Virtuosity and our booth, we're going to have a lot of fun products for you to try out. Maybe purchase if you're interested, and of course, do a valve alignment if you want. Again, the link for that, bobreeves.com/IWBC. Hope to see you there. 2 days later, I fly back from Connecticut to LA, and then I head on the road up to Salt Lake City for the International Trumpet Guild Conference, held at the University of Utah this year. The dates for that, May 28th through the 31st. That one is almost booked up with alignment. So if you're interested in getting a valve alignment, go to bobreeves.com/ITG, and you'll have the opportunity to schedule a slot. We go all out for ITG, of course. So there's going to be tons of Reeves mouthpieces, tons of guard bags. We'll have some great Shires instruments. We'll have some Charlie Davis instruments. We're a little low on Van Laar right now, but we have a Chuck Findlay and a flugelhorn in stock. So if that doesn't sell in the next few weeks, we'll have those there. And we'll have Brett Kendall, myself, and Matt Collins at the booth to help you choose the right equipment or share some good stories, have a good laugh. Look forward to seeing you at the ITG conference, May 28th to the 31st. A few weeks after that, we'll be heading to Tennessee, just outside of Nashville, actually Clarksville, Tennessee, at Austin Peay University for the William Adam Trumpet Festival. WilliamAdamTrumpet.com has all the information for the festival, and if you're interested in a valve alignment, you can go to bobreeves.com/William Adam and pre-book your alignment for that. Another one that's also booking up pretty quickly. That's going to be a wonderful festival, as always. And we also have a special podcast coming up, a little bonus episode, special panel that I'm recording actually in a day or two here. So we'll see. There's a lot of great guests showing up, similar to what we did with the William Adam Tribute podcast way back when, episode 15, more than 100 episodes ago. We did a nice panel discussion in tribute to William Adam. So look for that in the next episode or two to find out more about the kinds of things you would expect at the William Adam Trumpet Festival. That's all the information I have for this episode. I want to get right to my interview with Marie Speziale. Marie Speziale made history as the first woman trumpeter in a major American symphony orchestra, serving as Associate Principal Trumpet of the Cincinnati Symphony for over 3 decades. A trailblazer on stage and in the classroom, she's performed under the baton of legends like Stravinsky and Bernstein, jammed with Duke Ellington, and taught at top institutions, including Indiana University and Rice University. A founding member of Monarch Brass and a past president of the International Women's Brass Conference, Marie's influence spans continents, generations, and genres, and her legacy continues to inspire musicians worldwide. And now, here's my interview with Marie Speziale. Well, I'm so honored to have on the other side of the bell with me today, Marie Speziale. Marie, thanks for joining me. How you doing?
It's a pleasure to be with you, John.
And we might have get joined by Nico in the background at some point during the interview, hopefully.
Yes. He can be very vocal at times.
Nico's your dog. What kind of dog is Nico?
He's part Havanese and part Yorkshire Terrier.
Oh.
Or he's my terrorist, as I call him.
So that I think that equates to a lot of personality, if I understand my dog breeds correctly.
Oh, yes. Very much so.
I love
He's
it.
a little clown.
So hopefully Nico will join us at some point. But before we get to dogs, let's talk about the trumpet, and let's start right from the beginning. How did you find the trumpet, or did the trumpet end up finding you?
I think it was more like the trumpet found me.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, the first time that I heard trumpet live was in my living room. I grew up here in a Latin community, Ybor City, which you may or may not know was the cigar capital of the world back in the 20th century.
Really?
Both my parents made the hand-rolled Cuban cigars for a living. So my dad loved music. He had taught himself to play banjo, guitar, mandolin, and when he moved the family from New York to Tampa, Florida, he became enamored of the Cuban music, the Latino music.
Yeah.
That's when he taught himself to play piano, and he found himself in one of the local bands. They were known as conjuntos, the Cuban conjuntos. And from time to time, the band would rehearse at our home. I can remember so many times, the family moving all the living room furniture to the side, and the musicians coming in and rehearsing in our home. And I was just a little kid.
So some of your earliest memories are a band in your living room.
And
I love it.
Exactly.
I love it. Wow. So you had the conjunto band and rehearsing, and then did that develop into playing the trumpet, or?
The progression was, and at that point, I was very young, and this went on for a few years until at my elementary school, it was decided that we should have music classes, and the school system, Tampa school system, hired a teacher to provide music for the students at the elementary school, which I attended. And we were all given a musical aptitude test, and I scored a perfect score. So the music teacher contacted my mom and dad, because at that point their plan was to try to organize a band. They wanted a band for the elementary school. And the teacher, Mr. Comparetto, contacted my parents and said, "Your child really seems to have a lot of potential. She scored perfect on our music test, little aptitude test, and we'd love to have her in the band." And so there was a conversation with my parents and Mr. Comparetto, and at that point there was very minimal disposable income. So the band director was trying to guide my mom and dad toward clarinet or flute or possibly saxophone. But when I was asked what I wanted to play, my immediate response was trumpet. That's what I wanted to play. And
interesting.
Since this is interesting as well, when I professed that I wanted to play trumpet, Mr. Comparetto was, I guess, trying to convince my parents that little girls didn't play trumpet. Basically, those were the words. Little girls don't play trumpet. So we should try to move her toward another instrument. And as it turns out, we were fortunate enough to find someone not in the immediate family, but one of the, just more distant relatives. We found out that they owned a cornet. And so I wound up being able to borrow that cornet. And that's how I started.
So you started on
with a cornet.
You started on cornet because you were able to borrow one. And I mean, did you feel discouraged when your teacher said, "Oh, you should be playing something else"?
No.
Just...
I was just really adamant. And
okay.
In fact, for a while there, nothing was happening. And they kept saying, well, maybe my parents said, well, maybe she should just be playing piano. At least we have a piano in the house. We don't have to put out any money, that kind of thing,
Mm-hmm.
And then that's when they, started pursuing the can we borrow an instrument? And I guess they started putting out feelers. Anyway, I was delighted when I found out that they did find someone at least in the neighborhood, and it was part of the family that had this instrument. It was an old beat up cornet. And I remember having to use my dad's belt to hold the case together. The valves were frozen, the belt was crumpled, and I'd give anything to. I wish I had that instrument now. This is what I started with.
Yeah.
And as luck would have it, I think it was really fortuitous that I started on a cornet and not a trumpet. At the time, I could see all the little guys around me with the shiny new trumpets, and I sat there with cornet, but I was happy because I got the instrument that I wanted to play. But I think it was really helpful that I started with a cornet because I'm only 5'2". If you can imagine me at 10 years old, I'm not very tall, not very big, chubby, yes. And as we all know, that whole gravity thing with the trumpet, when you start to get lazy, anyway, and it's, obviously the response feels a little easier. It's more user-friendly, the conical properties and all that. As it turns out, it was blessing in disguise to start with cornet. And honestly, I promote that. When I know that someone, when I'm talking to musicians and talking to teachers at doing master classes, I say if you're starting a young person, especially a little young girl, or even a little boy who's not really muscular, start them on a cornet. Mm-hmm. Do them a favor.
Yeah. Can always switch to the trumpet later.
Yeah, and they'll eventually get to the trumpet.
Yeah. Yeah. Or maybe not. Maybe they'll stick with the cornet their whole career. I love. So did the cornet come naturally to you once you started playing? What was your progression like?
The progression, it was obvious that I had talent, had some talent, mm-hmm. and I would pick up things by ear. I'd hear the band playing, and I would imitate what they were playing, and my dad realized right away that I was starting to make progress rather quickly, and he started inquiring in the area, inquiring of his fellow musicians. He wanted to find out who the trumpet teachers were in the area because he was really adamant about learning to read music because he never had the opportunity to learn to read music. He was an apprentice cigar maker at age 11. He loved music, everything from ear, but he never learned to read. Mm-hmm. So he was insistent that I learn to read music and that I have a proper teacher. So he found my trumpet teacher. His name was Robert Price. He was an excellent trumpet player, but he was, more than anything, he was a gifted teacher, not just in trumpet. This man really taught the fundamentals of music to all his students. He was a band director when I met him, he was a band director in a junior high school, and within a couple of years of our working together, he was promoted to a brand new high school here in Tampa, which was in those days a very premier high school. So I started studying with him on a regular basis, and my first solo in the 7th grade was the Carnival of Venice.
Wow, it's 7th grade.
The Arbin
Jeez.
version.
So you went from 0 to 60 and pretty quickly. Wow.
Yeah, I did. I was really committed. I was really committed to that instrument. I absolutely loved what I was doing. Mm-hmm. And again, as luck would have it, and not just luck, it was my parents invested a lot in my career. They sacrificed a lot, and they made it possible for me to attend the junior high school where my trumpet teacher taught. And it was his idea. I was apparently just progressing so very quickly. Mr. Price talked to my folks and suggested that if it would be possible to have me attend the junior high school, it would be great, because I would have his voice in my ear. And that's exactly what happened.
Every day.
I wound up. Yes, my dad would have to go to work in the morning a half hour earlier to do whatever he had to do. My mom and dad worked side by side, so he would do whatever he had to do with the cigars. Mm-hmm. He would then come pick me up, and pick my mom up, take her to work. She filled in the gap while he drove me to North Tampa. Back in those days, there were no expressways. Then he would go back to work, work the whole day, take my mom home in the afternoon, and then come and pick me up in the afternoon. And sometimes, he'd have to wait while we rehearsed or whatever. Anyway, he did this 3 years of junior high school and 2 years of high school.
Just so you would have that opportunity.
Yes, because then at that point, Mr. Price went to the premier high school. And as I said, I had that Mr. Price's voice in my ear for the longest time. And he could supervise me. And I can't begin to know, John, I can't begin to know what my career would have looked like without this man. It seriously rested right squarely on him. And that's not to say that I was blessed and fortunate enough to work with some amazing teachers, and I had wonderful mentors. And, it does take a village, but those fundamentals. In fact, and I didn't realize this until I was well into my orchestral career. I was home visiting with my folks, and my mom had some newspaper clippings and photos and things. And she said, "Marie, can we, go through these? I need to know. Let's see what we can organize them." Anyway, so she started pulling out all these pictures, and she had a picture of that little elementary band. We're at the neighborhood, the only one and only neighborhood theater back in those days. And we looked like we're all across the front of the stage. There were probably 18 or 20 of us, all boys. And I'm on the end, the little girl on the end. And I'm looking at this picture, and I'm looking at it, and I'm going, oh my God. I sat on the end, and there were like about 3 guys. And then the fourth guy in, fourth little boy in, he and I both wound up with major orchestra jobs. That fourth person was Adele Sanchez.
Really? Principal
of the National Symphony Orchestra. And he studied with Bob Price.
Wow. Oh.
So I don't know if, I'm sure he would acknowledge Bob Price if you were talking. So here's this little we're talking about inner city, Barrio Latino. We were mostly Italians, Cubans, some Mexicans, some Puerto Ricans, real mixture, you know, and all blue collar. But here we were out in that little band of 18, 20 kids, two orchestra players.
Two major orchestra players. That's incredible. And what an honor to bring Mr. Price up. I got to ask you, because I was fortunate to have a really influential band director as well. What are some of his sayings or principles that stick with you after all these years? There's got to be something, right?
Oh, sure. She said he really focused on tone quality. For him, it was all about the tone, and he would say, this is what he would convey to the groups that he conducted as well. You know, he would say, I don't care if you can play the flight of the bumblebee hanging from your toes. If you don't have a good tone, nobody's going to want to hear you. Okay. And then he said, see things like corny things like, don't worry about the sharps and the flats until you learn the tune. Things like that.
I like that. I love that one. Don't worry about the sharps and flats until you've learned the tune. Oh man, wow, that's great. Shout out to all the band directors out there. They're out there in the trenches, and so many of us wouldn't be where we are today if they didn't start us young and inspire us and give us fundamentals.
And he did. Yeah. He was terrific at the fundamentals and in all the instruments, and he was very passionate about teaching band.
Yeah. Oh, amazing.
He band director,
So as you're getting through high school, was it an easy choice to go on in music? I mean, was that your life's goal, or?
I never even thought about it. I just did it. It never occurred to me to make a choice. It was, for me, it was just a given. I was always going to, I didn't sit and figure out, now let's see, what am I going to do for the rest of my, it was just there. Like I said, it chose me. And I was, raring to go no matter what.
And were you geared towards orchestral playing at this time, or any particular aspirations?
No, in fact, back in those days, John Philip Sousa was classical music to me. If somebody had said to me when I was a little kid in that 18 or 20 piece little band in elementary school that I'm going to be, sitting in a symphony orchestra as my primary job, I probably would have laughed in their faces. No, I grew up playing Afro-Cuban music because I would imitate what I'd hear, That was it. Afro-Cuban music, commercial. Yeah. And the whole picture started, except for obviously the band, the rep that we played in the band and playing, solos at contests and things like that. The whole orchestral thing started to resonate with me in junior high school. I was fortunate enough to go up to Florida State University. In those days, they had a 4 or 5 week music camp. In fact, John Marcellus, the trombone, sadly, we just lost him.
Just a few months ago. Yeah.
And I just saw him about a year ago because he was in my area. John and I were at the same camp together. He was in the high school division, and I was in the junior high school
at Florida State. And I wound up playing in the orchestra, playing in the jazz band, playing in the band, playing solo with the band, and that was probably the very first taste of orchestral, but it was still like 90% band, band and playing a lot of commercial kind of music. In fact, when I was in junior high school, I was in a 4-piece group. We had our own television show for 22 weeks. Really?
Yes, I know. And this was the advent of television.
Yeah.
We're talking now. Well, I was 13. I was 13 years old, so that would have been 1955. Yeah, I'm 83. You can do the math. Look at all the gray hair. Circa 1955, 1956, and through there. And we had, as I said, television was new. And the local NBC affiliate knew our group. We had actually played in one of their radio programs, and a gentleman from the Hillsborough County school system actually had a weekly radio program. And what he would do, he would go from school to school to kind of highlight the events of the week. He would focus on the athletes. He would focus on musicians, the scholastics. And anyway, in his head, he came up with this idea of bringing four of us together, four of us from four different schools. Wait till I tell you the instrumentation. If you just think about the instrumentation, it's almost laughable. Accordion, organ, double bass, and trumpet.
You're just missing a banjo.
Yeah.
Or bagpipes, something like that. Oh, I love it. And this was all school-age children.
School age. There were two of us in junior high school, two in high school. And he brought us together. What he did was he contacted all four sets of parents and proposed that we meet, that all four of these youngsters meet with instruments to see if we could play together, because he had heard us all play individually. But he had it in his head to promote this young group. And so we did, and we had like a little jam session, and we actually recorded the jam session, and he proposed it to WFLA, the TV folks. And he said, let's start by way of radio first. Let's have like a radio program and see what the response is. So we put together this little radio program, the four of us. We got together, I don't know how many times. This is, we're talking several decades ago.
Yeah.
We obviously got together and decided on some tunes. We had fake books, and we picked pieces that one of the pieces featured the organ, the other featured the trumpet, and we had specific pieces. And he knew he was pretty well versed in the music that he thought he'd want to hear.
Yeah.
And they introduced us via radio, and the response was really good. And he sold that to the TV folks. And so what happened was they decided to put together, we're talking about, it predated and you're too young, but there was a dance show on TV. I can't remember now what it's called. Anyway, we predated that. It was basically a teen show on television.
Like American Bandstand or something, or one of those?
Yes,
yeah.
Exactly. That was it. Okay, so we predated that by maybe a couple of years, maybe.
Jeez.
So we had our own little band, and they put out a call for talent in the area. So we had teenagers coming in to sing and dance, and we would have auditions before every show. And every week we selected a soloist, and we picked our music, and we did this for about, I think it was either 18 or 20, I think it was 22 weeks of shows.
Did you guys get paid for that too? Or was it just? No, but we learned all about camera angles. I was going to say, you guys you have a show band. You take it on the road.
Yeah, we did. And it was all like, when I think about it, it was all really, we were just doing what we knew we could do it, and somehow it worked.
Amazing.
But yeah, there's
what an experience.
I know, it was incredible. It was incredible, and we're all still in school and all our activities, everything. But everybody had good grades. We're all involved. Yeah.
Do you have any? Is that transferred over to VHS or anything? Do you have any?
No,
recordings of it?
I have, there's somewhere I've got some old, they're reel-to-reel tapes, but I had them transcribed. Yeah, there are some that survived.
It's going to be in the archive somewhere. I'd love to see that. at some point.
Yeah.
Throw that up on YouTube.
Yes, in fact, they were used. I was awarded the ITG. What's it called? It's right
up-
here.
up on-
ITG Honorary Award. Yes,
Yeah.
it's
It's on the wall.
It's over there. It's
There it
over
is.
there. I haven't had the chance to. I just moved to Florida just a little over a year ago. I'm still trying to figure out where everything goes. But yes, so they put together a like kind of This Is Your Life. So there is a clip of that group.
I have to look for that. How cool.
Yeah. It's
So with all the showbiz, you had more of an interest in orchestra playing, or were you happy to do anything?
again.
Yeah.
I guess I digressed a lot.
Oh, that's okay. It's a great story. I love that.
Well, you turns, but eventually get back to where we to answer your question. It wasn't until I got to the conservatory in Cincinnati that I became really aware of what it felt like to sit in a good orchestra.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, when I got to the conservatory, I didn't even audition for the orchestra there. I auditioned for band, wind ensemble, and brass choir. Orchestra was not on my radar. So when I auditioned for all those groups, I wound up placing principal chair in all three.
Mm-hmm.
And so the orchestra conductor heard about me through his assistant, and I got a call the day before the audition for orchestra, and I was asked if I might have some interest in orchestra. They noticed that I hadn't signed up to. They'd heard about
all the other groups, and hey, why aren't you on the list for this?
Right, and so, and I told them I don't know any orchestra pieces. I haven't done much transposition. I don't have anything prepared. They said, just come in and play whatever you played for the band audition. And so I wound up placing principal in that as well. So some of the grad students were.
Who the heck is this? She's playing band music and
yeah.
So, and I was back up one step. How did you end up in Cincinnati, going to the College-Conservatory?
There again, it was for me. It was like a given. The CCM magnets seemed to be all around me here in Tampa. I never even considered Juilliard or anything like that. My dad, I had it ingrained in me but my dad was born in New York, and he wanted to get out of there. And it was always in my head that was a place that my dad wanted to leave. And so I don't know, maybe I was intimidated. Maybe I didn't think I was good enough for Juilliard or anything like that. Mm-hmm. I auditioned for a couple of places came to audition me and offer me. One was Cornell, and I think there was another one. Of course, the state schools too, mm-hmm. offered scholarships and everything. But I had always heard about the conservatory first through my Mr. Price's very best friend in this town, another band director who was a graduate of the Conservatory of Music. And I had the utmost respect for Mr. Scott. And he and Bob Price were like this. So there's that influence, number one. Number two, back in those days, the music school, or at least the music schools that I knew, would come down to Florida in January to audition. I wonder why Florida in January,
Professors wanted out.
Yes, and one of the connections was through Bob Scott again, the admissions director of CCM would come down every January. So I was introduced to him as a freshman. So they kind of kept their eyes on me. Every time he would come down, he wanted to check to see what was I doing. You're still interested in the conservatory. At that point, I had already been to Florida State University, and their trumpet professor there, surprisingly, was a graduate of CCM,
Okay.
Conservatory in Cincinnati.
Yeah.
And one of the biggest names at the time was Al Hurt, graduate of Cincinnati.
CCM. Yeah.
So it was like all the lights were flashing. It never occurred to me that was it. You know, how kids say, "Oh, I want to go to Harvard." You know, I want to go to Yale. I want to go wherever. You know, for me, it was wow, CCM. I had this school built up in my head.
So it was on your radar. You got in, and then,
Right.
like you said, you got principal in all of the groups, including the orchestra, and that's kind of where you started developing your orchestra bug.
Yes, that and the fact that, well, I was invited to actually play a solo with the orchestra at their holiday concert when I was not my freshman year, my sophomore year. That the first time I played with the orchestra was when I was 19 years old as a soloist.
Jeez.
And then soon after that, this would have been would have been the next year in my junior year. In my junior year, that's what it was. My junior year, the second trumpet player became ill between a rehearsal and a concert, and so my teacher contacted me as soon as it was learned that they needed a second trumpet and they needed somebody to sight read the concert. So he contacted me. He said, "I know you can do the job. This is what we're playing." And at that point, you know, I'm still relatively new to the orchestral world. So I went in and sight read the concert.
This is for the Cincinnati Symphony?
Yes.
Jeez.
And Maestro Rudolf was the conductor at the time. Maestro Rudolf told the personal manager that on the strength of my sight reading the concert, that if Mr. Janacek was going to be out for any length of time, that he wanted me to play. So I wound up playing almost an entire season with them, including tour, went to Carnegie Hall, recorded. So I was getting on the job training in terms of orchestra experience.
That's incredible.
And I have to credit Maestro Rudolf was every bit as much my teacher, because I was just a very young player.
20, 21 years old, something like that.
20 when I started to play. And actually I turned 21 on tour, on the first tour that I played with him. Yeah.
What a birthday present.
I know.
Where was the tour? Do you remember?
It was mostly the Midwest.
Okay.
You know, we were on and off trains and buses and the whole, you know, very few flights back then. And I celebrated my 21st birthday on tour with the orchestra in Nebraska.
Of all the places, a lot of corn.
Yeah. We were in Iowa. We were in Missouri. I mean, it was about a 3 tour. I'd say probably a 2-3 week tour. You know, so I learned a lot about the orchestra business, about touring. You know, and I was so young. You know,
Jeez.
But at the same time, I was learning. You know, it was just amazing. Every day was a lesson. Every day was a lesson, and you know, I was playing all this orchestral music that I had never, ever heard in my life. You know, most kids walk into a music school and they've got B flat trumpet, C trumpet, you know, E flat trumpet, piccolo. You know, I walked in with a B flat trumpet, you know, that's it.
Jeez. And so what did your training look like then? Well, first of all, your teacher was Eugene, right? Eugene Blee in
Eugene
CCM.
Blee. Just a lovely man. Lovely man.
And he was in the symphony, and was your connection
he was
there.
principal in the symphony, and then and so I was there, and I had all my mentors around me, people that Betty Glover at the time had a brass orchestral repertoire class. I think she was ahead of the curve. I think she had that class before any of the other music schools had that class. So I was getting, and yeah, I was just like total immersion. I just totally immersed in music. It was great. Absolutely the best 4 consecutive years of my life where I spent at CCN. Yeah. It was like a kid in a candy store. I mean, it was ridiculous.
Yeah. Well, so what are the kind of things you learned on the job? I mean, what?
Oh, well, for instance, first time I'd ever heard the Rite of Spring other than snippets to pass a music history exam, a listening exam. Mm-hmm. First time I heard the Rite of Spring live, I played it, and Stravinsky was on stage.
No.
He was frail. It was toward the end of his life.
But still.
He was there. He conducted the first half of the program. Mm-hmm. His associate, Bob Kraft, conducted the Rite of Spring. But Stravinsky was there for every one of the Rite of Spring rehearsals. They had a chair positioned next to the podium. And if every now and then he would either talk to his associate for what he wanted, or there's just very deep booming voice that he would, and I remember the arm going up. Yeah. And okay, so we're talking about what did I learn? Yeah. For instance, one of the first things that I had to learn right away was within weeks, we did the Bartók Concerto for Orchestra. Mm-hmm. I had to sight read the Defia 3-cornered hat and Prokofiev 5. That was part of the sight reading of the concert that I had to fill in for the second trumpet player.
And this is on top of your normal schoolwork, coursework,
right?
Classes.
Yeah. Fortunately, back in those days, because there were so many, at least it felt like so many to me, as I, in the rearview mirror, it's just that they were so significant. A lot of the faculty at the conservatory, instrumental faculty at the conservatory, were in the orchestra. That was their primary job. Mm-hmm. And then they would supplement their income teaching at the conservatory. Mm-hmm. So I don't think it was part of it must have been intentional. Of course it had to be intentional, because Ernie Glover, who was the second trombone player at the time, conducted the brass choir. He conducted the band. He conducted the wind ensemble. So the rehearsals were at night. Classes were in the daytime. I think if Mr. Janacek had become ill in my sophomore year, I don't know whether I could have managed it or not. Mm-hmm. It was just that by the time I got to my junior year, most of my coursework was done. It was electives, lessons, ensembles. Well, guess what? The ensembles were at night and on Saturday morning. And my electives, I could work around, because the word through Mr. Glover went to the administration that Maestro Rudolf had asked that I be engaged. So they worked with me. Mm-hmm. I even have that little note from the associate dean where she sent out a note to all my teachers and said, can make sure we work with her so that she gets the work done, whatever, so she can do this,
I suppose also one of the benefits of being in a conservatory where it is a professional training ground instead of having to deal with certain state requirements.
Exactly.
If you're going to not a conservatory. And then
it's just amazing, Yeah.
And so, and then in doing so, did you realize at the time you were the first woman brass player?
No.
Didn't even cross your mind.
That did not come to mind until Susan introduced the IWBC. And it was around that time that, and I don't think it was Susan that said or that called it, and I can't remember, I honestly can't remember how we came to that. I think someone must have asked me, like, so are you the first? And it was like, well, I don't know. I never thought about it. I mean, I was just doing what I wanted to do. I was
just show up and play.
Yeah, show up, exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
So it was when it first, people started, through the IWBC, people were becoming more aware of women brass players. That's when I guess it was okay. So Marie's like the people were starting to say, yeah, I think she's the first woman trumpet player in the major symphony orchestra. Someone challenged it, and it was Joan Fan, who at the time was working in the St. Louis Symphony Orchestra and helped Susan with a lot of the development of the IWBC. Made contact with the American Symphony Orchestra League. I think it's called something else now. And they did verify that I was indeed the first woman trumpeter in the major symphony orchestra. There had been women that had played in some orchestras prior to that, but number one, it was during World War II. So those people were filling in.
Yeah, interim positions.
Interim positions. And the other thing that confirmed, at least by American Symphony Orchestra League standards, there's a certain level budget. I can't remember what that amount was.
Yeah.
Where you consider what a major symphony orchestra is.
Yeah. Yeah. And
but
you didn't realize that at the time. That was all kind of in hindsight when someone told you years later. Yeah.
Something challenged. I thought, well, okay, well, she was playing in 1942. Well, that was the year I was born. So, but they said, then Joan Fan was the one that, she says, I don't think that qualifies. So we did have it confirmed.
Yeah. Fascinating. And I mean, even with other, World War II or other smaller orchestras, of still having a woman trumpet player was unusual at the time.
Oh, for sure.
And I mean, did you have to face any adversity through your career, either through guest conductors or, because of your gender?
Well, actually, and there's an irony in here too. The very first orchestra that turned me down to audition was the St. Louis Symphony Orchestra.
Interesting.
The word back in those days, a lot of the vacancies came, well, obviously announced in the trade paper, the journal, the FFM journal, but it was not unheard of to have personnel managers contact people that they knew around the country. And my teacher, Gene Blee, received a call from the personnel manager from the St. Louis Symphony Orchestra asking if Mr. Blee had any recommendations, because they were going to be holding an audition for second trumpet. And Mr. Blee said, oh, absolutely. He said, because at the time I was already playing the job. That happened, I think, toward the end of my junior year, beginning of my senior year. And when Mr. Blee was asked for a person, his response was, yes, I have someone that I think you should really hear. She's been playing with us. She does an excellent job. And as soon as the personnel manager heard he said, interrupted him and said, I'm sorry, but the maestro won't even hear her, much less hire her, no matter how well she plays. So St. Louis was the first one.
Wow.
But then I won the job like less than 2 years later. So I never really went looking because I was happy where I was, Cincinnati.
So you were playing in the section for that year or so, and then so a position ended up opening up in Cincinnati. And
what happened was in my senior year, the third trumpet player became ill in the Cincinnati Symphony Orchestra. So I wound up playing again almost another complete season with them on third trumpet. And I think back in and we're talking about early 60s. At that time, most of the orchestras, particularly in that category, we're talking about Pittsburgh, Cincinnati, St. Louis, most of those orchestras were only there were only 3 trumpets on the contract. But things were moving toward 4 in the trumpets, 5 in the horns, doubling, they were starting to add to the ranks. So I believe what management's thinking was, and I never had it really asked the question or had it verified. I was just happy that they did it on the strength of, based on the fact that 2 consecutive years, 2 out of their 3-man section, there were illnesses. It was time to get that 4th person in there. So they added the position. And unlike nowadays, where if you've been playing for any length of time, you're kind of pre-advanced, they didn't do that, which I'm grateful for. I had to stand in line I had to start at square one with everyone else.
So you weren't a shoe-in. You had to, yeah.
I was definitely not a shoe-in. I'm sure, if it had been if there'd been the internet, it would have gone out as she had the inside track. No, I had to stand in line with everybody else.
So you remember the audition?
Oh, I sure do. It was not blind. It was in the maestro's office. It couldn't have been too much bigger than this room that I'm in right now, but in that office were 3 trumpeters, personnel manager, principal horn, principal trombone, tuba. Needless to say, it was crowded.
I was going to say, everyone's cramped in there listening to.
Exactly. And you're sitting there. You're the stand. Once they closed the door, they would move the stand up so you could get, and your back is to the wall there. And that was the audition. Yeah. And I guess it was convincing enough because there was only 1 round. They only had 1 round. There were no playoffs.
And they announced you right then and there?
Well, there was deliberating.
Yeah. But, you found out that day?
Right.
Jeez. So you didn't have to go far from home. You stayed in Cincinnati, and you were there for, I can't count how many years.
Yeah. 32.
64 to 96.
32. But like I said, I had 2 years in, while I was still in school. So, yeah. And, but it was that audition was nerve-wracking. I'll have to say, because you've done the job. You can play, but you're there and you don't want to let anybody down,
Yeah. You're playing for people as well.
Yeah, exactly.
A panel of folks you maybe have just heard of or yeah.
But once I started playing, a lot of it was more like, there's always that anticipation, but once you.
And I suppose also being, 6 inches from the panel instead of them sitting out in the audience somewhere or behind the spotlights in the dark room or something.
Oh, the associate conductor was there too. I forgot. Yeah, it was such a crowded room. It was just like, okay.
It's almost like a deodorant commercial. I hope everyone used their deodorant that morning. Everyone cramped in that little space. So, I mean, I don't want to gloss over that your tenure of the orchestra. I mean, you have to have some memorable performances or conductors that particularly stick out to you.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Well, for instance, like I said, just with Stravinsky on stage, or getting to play some of the principal pieces, what Copland conducting. Yeah, it's it's great. It was. Yeah, I'm blessed beyond anything I could have imagined for that little chubby kid that was learned to play trumpet in their living room.
Yeah. But it says, I was reading online, you also recorded some soundtracks for James Brown.
Yes, and I didn't come to realize that until I moved back to Florida. I was already here. I was going back and forth. And one of the times that I was back in Cincinnati, I had to go to the Spectrum store, to get everything, because I would put everything on hold for 6 months and stuff like that. And I'm in the Spectrum store, and I'm looking at this guy, and he's looking at me, he says, Marie, Paul, we're like looking at each other. And he said, I haven't seen you in so many years. He says, my gosh, he says, remember all those nights when we laid down those tracks for James Brown? And I looked at him like he had 3 heads. It was like, what? Well, they would, I don't know. Do you know the name Dave Matthews? Not the Dave Matthews that everybody knows, but he was in New York for a long time, and now he's been living in Japan for a while.
No, not.
He actually wrote some of the arrangements for James Brown. Dave was my contemporary at the conservatory. He and I don't know if you recognize the name Carmen de Leon.
Yeah.
Well, Carmen and Dave and I, we were all in the freshman class together. And Carmen was the phenom on horn. He was a freshman, and he wound up with all the freshmen, as a freshman, like me, all the principal spots. Mm-hmm. It was like these 2 freshmen came in at the same time, and the older folks are going like,
cleaned house, yeah.
Anyway, so Dave wrote some. It was through Dave that we wound up recording some of the background music for James Brown. But back in the day, it was at the King Recording Studios. I don't know if you know King.
Yeah.
He would have to do them like starting around 11:30 at night, because it was kind of on a main drag, and they didn't want any of the traffic noise to bleed in. So we'd record from 11 till 2 in the morning, and you go, oh, ba 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 da da, oh, ba ba da da, and you don't know all you got is the background.
Yeah, you're just putting down horn parts.
Yeah, all the horn parts. And seriously, I didn't know until I'm in like my 70s that.
And you didn't realize you were on James Brown albums.
Yeah, and it's even on there is a James Brown, one of the James Brown albums. It even has the list of people, or somewhere one of my neighbors, he got intrigued by this, that I played for James Brown. Anyway,
Mahler 5, whatever, Igor Stravinsky, whatever, but James Brown.
Yeah. Oh, and the other, you said memorable moments. God, I had so many memorable moments in the orchestra. One of the very first was, I think, within a year or 2 of my winning the job in the orchestra, Eric Kunzel was hired as the pops conductor. Or I'm sorry, he was hired. Take it back. He became the pops conductor, but he was hired as the associate conductor or assistant conductor. And we had a concert featuring Duke Ellington. And it was one of the very first, not the first, I think, but one of the very earliest crossover concerts where we had a jazz giant with a symphony orchestra. And so Duke was with us the entire week. We were we were playing the concert. We had played the first half. We had intermission. We played most of the second half, and we're nearing the end of the program. And Duke started talking to the audience, talking about what a great time he'd had with us that week, and thanked the orchestra. The usual thank everyone. And then he went on and he said, I hear that there's some folks in the orchestra that like to play jazz. And he says, Marie, would you like to come up and play a couple of tunes with us?
What?
Yeah.
No.
Serious. And at that point, Mike Donachev, the person that I had filled in for, looks at me and says, are you going to do it? I'm like, no. Of course I'm going to do it. I'm going to say, nah, thank you very much, but no thank you. So I walked out front. Well, what had happened was the conductor, Eric, told Duke about the trumpet player that likes to play jazz. Because at that point, Eric was starting to feature. There are a few of us in the group or in the orchestra that played jazz. So he would find ways to feature us. So I walked out front and, I floated out front.
I was going to say, wow. So what did you play?
Well, we faked the blues. We just faked a slow tempo blues, and then we did a ballad, a body and soul, and then an up-tempo blues, another up-tempo tune.
Just you and Duke, or was it his band there?
Well, he had Joe Benjamin was on bass. I can't remember the name of the drummer.
Yeah.
And of course him. It was just a trio. So I walked out front. He was really wonderful. He made me feel very, very relaxed. It was just like, wow. That was, like I said, I floated out front. And so my feet didn't touch the ground for a few weeks after that. Anyway, it was, in fact, it had been, people were advertising this concert in like Downbeat, Associated Press, like ahead of the program, because it was, you're too young. You don't realize what it was like 60 years ago. We're talking about 60 years ago now. And so it came, there was an article through the Associated Press that went out to some papers and Downbeat. Anyway, and they talked about this great collaboration between the symphony orchestra and how well it was received, and Duke did, just all about Duke and everything. And then they went on to the kind of personal elements about Duke invited some orchestra players to play a couple of tunes with him. And the trumpet player that he invited was Marie Speziale. Mm-hmm. So I guess they just didn't want to acknowledge that it was Marie. It was Marie Speziale.
Oh, my God.
Well, that's not the end of the story. About a week or two after this whole thing, I'm still floating around the hall. I run into our photographer. And it was almost like he accosted me. He came up, he said, Marie, he says, I was at that Pops concert. What a great, I hope we have more Pops concert and everything. He said, what was it like to play with Duke Ellington? I said, it was fantastic. He said, well, I'm sure glad I had my camera. And I went, you had what? He says, oh, I've got a great shot of you.
Oh my gosh. Oh, that's
the black wall in the back there.
That's like a painting. That's amazing. Oh.
I had proof that it was not Marie Speziale.
That's
Joe Benjamin. I can't remember I want to say.
I'm sure the internet can help us out. And some Duke Ellington fan will know the drummer.
Yeah.
That time. Yeah.
So that.
Oh, what a great photo. So I mean, you have the memory, but it's really cool to have the physical proof.
Do you know Mark Doolin?
Oh yeah, of course, yeah.
Well, Mark was my student.
Yeah.
Okay, so Mark, what must have been about 5 or 6 years ago, he said, Marie, he says, I've got to have that picture of you and Duke. Please bring it. So I brought it to him, and he made a dozen of them and started passing them out.
That's beautiful. I love it. Yeah, I want to get a copy for the shop wall now. That's such a great story.
I can send it to you.
I love it. I can print it out here and get it nice framed. I'd love to have that. It's such a great story. Then I'll get you signed. I'll get you to sign it at IWVC.
Oh, for sure.
Let's make it happen. And I grew up. My father played the Cincinnati Pops albums all the time. So is it the Cincinnati? Was it the same section, or how did that work in Cincinnati?
No,
was
it the same section, except for when we had things like music from James Bond, or when we had some Screech stuff. You know, I mean, I know what lane to stay in. I'm not a Screech player, so we would bring people in like Vinny. Vinny did a lot of stuff with us, especially when Doc came in. You know, Doc recorded with us.
Yeah.
We did the big band album with Cab Calloway and Jerry Mulligan, and I don't know if you know that album.
Yeah. My dad had that. I mean, all the stuff from the 70s, 80s.
Your dad was a trumpet player, right?
Yeah, Keith Snell. Yeah. So. I grew up. All of our car trips was listening to the Cincinnati. Well, he had, obviously Cincinnati Symphony recordings as well. But on car trips around the Southwest, he'd always put the Pops music on and the film music, the Eric Korngold and all of that. Yeah,
we had some pretty decent recordings. Yeah, no, it was predominantly it's the same section.
Yeah,
we had add-ons if there were like extra trumpets, like when we had to do some of the John Williams stuff. Because that could be a bloodbath.
Yeah. Well, what fun though to play the standard rep, but then also to get to play all this great epic film music and big band stuff.
Fantastic. Yeah. So I've had some. I've had some real moments in my lifetime. I've been blessed. I don't know. I'm great. I'm blessed, and I'm so grateful for everything that I've experienced in my life. And
you ever get to play any Latin groups like from your childhood?
No, not really.
No.
Most of them felt, they died out with the old folks, I think. Now it's more,
You still listen to it? Still listen to the like old Cuban music?
Oh, every now and then, especially down here, Yeah.
A lot of that in Florida. I want to talk a little. I'll get geeky a little bit because I thank you for talking about your career and all your experiences. I do want to talk a little bit about trumpet, though. What did you have a regular routine, practice routine or warm up routine or something, and did that kind of change throughout your life? If you did have one,
that changed. I think you have to keep it mixed up. If you start doing the same thing day after day after day without introducing something that's going to challenge you or at least change a variety, I think you can get a little stagnant, But I can tell you one routine that I did fairly regularly and for a long period of time was basically the routine in Louis Davidson's book.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Trumpet techniques.
Yeah.
Do you know the trumpet techniques?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I met Mr. Davidson as a young cleric. He was just up the road from Cincinnati at IU. And he sent me a complimentary copy of his book. And I started working in that book. And I have used it ever since in my teaching because I think there's so much in that book. I mean, if you want to keep your fundamentals in place and want to keep your skills honed, it's in that book. He's taken things that you would normally get in Schlossberg and Clark and Arbin, but it's more organized. And the thing, at least for working with youngsters, especially developing players, the thing about that book is that it's like a building block. Everything starts down in the low register where you really start to build like a solid base. And then, he doesn't add notes, or he does add notes, but it's, very well thought out. So I would use that as the basis for my warm-ups, but I would pick and choose from column 1, column 2. I didn't do the same ones every day. Some I did every day, depending on how the chops felt. What did I have a heavy concert the night before? Yeah.
So you like to mix it up. I know some folks are religious. They do the same thing every day, like brushing their teeth.
I know. And I profess that I did that for a while, but for not very long. And then it dawned on me that I needed to keep things moving,
Keep it fresh.
Challenging and trying to, I was already a developed player, so I would practice in opposites. For instance, like if I had a very heavy week, I'm going to work on some lighter stuff, to balance that. And if I have a light week, guess what? When I'm going home, I'm going to be pedal to the metal. And, and if I'm practicing, practicing upper register, I'm going to balance it with middle and low register, not just one thing, I kind of practiced in contrasts.
And I want to speak to you now in your role as a professor, which you've also done most of your career, but also having sat on many audition panels yourself. What advice could you give to young players or even older players that are going on the audition circuit these days in terms of what you're listening for on the panel that separates finalists or winners out from the rest, and any tips you give your students in terms of audition prep?
Well, again, I think the basics have to be there. Tone, time, tune, those have to be solid. And then beyond that, I like to hear colors in the sound. I like to hear honest projection, not forced projection. A lot of people, particularly if they're playing something loud, I guess the best way to describe it is that there's a lot of primary colors in their playing. And there's more to music than just primary colors. For me, the palette has to be wide-ranging. And particularly when you're having to convey the difference in your audition between what Mahler sounds like, what Beethoven sounds like, what Debussy sounds like, there's some finessing going on in there. I'm not sure if I'm answering your question.
No, it is. And I've never heard it described quite that way. And that's fascinating. I love I'm going to use that when folks are trying mouthpieces now. Primary colors versus more nuance and a broader palette. Yeah.
Yeah, a much broader palette. I mean, you can still play all the right notes. Mm-hmm. It's like you can play all the right notes for pictures and Petrushka or anything else. But each one of those has to have its own personality, its own sound. It's just the music needs to be finessed. And the other thing too, John, I don't know whether it happens when people get nervous there's no way to know this without knowing more intimately who that player is and what they sound like when they're in their comfort zone. Mm-hmm. The impression that I get, and it's not a matter of volume, although you do get that where somebody will just kind of like try to blow down the back wall. But I have a sense that in the auditions, rather than playing, no matter how long or short the note, there's a beginning, a middle, and an end. And I don't always hear people blow through the music, blow through the notes. It feels like they blow at the music in some of the auditions. And I'm not sure if I'm expressing it verbally.
Yeah, well, it makes sense. I mean, and it's one of those things where I'd ask you how to do that, but then that's a trumpet lesson. You need to have the player there, obviously, right? Because it'd be a mindset, how they're breathing, that sort of thing. I'm assuming a little bit of everything, or it could be any one of those things.
Right, because and that's usually when people are having issues with their playing, it's because, again, it doesn't feel like they're blowing through the instrument. They're just releasing the notes into the instrument rather than, it's almost like they're trying to barrel through it, instead of just use the tube as, I use the analogy that I use in teaching is like the lead pipe. It's like the bowling alley. If you want to get all the bowling pins down, you don't have to have a 4-foot wide or 3-foot wide bowling ball. You just got to go right. You just aim with speed and energy at that first bowling pin, and
I love it.
You don't have to crowd that. People try to crowd that pipe.
Yeah. As Bob Reeves used to say, the acoustics is your friend. The acoustics of your instrument is your friend.
Exactly.
Use it. Yeah. That's the, from the manufacturers. From the manufacturer's perspective. Yeah.
And the room that you're in is an extension of your music, of your playing. So you have to get, I guess maybe that's another way to describe it. When I hear young players audition, it feels like they're so focused on getting everything, right, like everything rhythmically right and intonation and all the notes are right there, all that very beginning of notes, everything's right, but it doesn't feel like it gets out to the audience.
Yeah.
It's like they're not using the hall. We're not using whatever room they're in.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love your description of playing loud by force versus just letting the instrument carry.
No. Of course, there are different philosophies of playing, and one size does not fit all, because we've got some amazing players that there are different philosophies. But what worked best for me was everything is on it's kind of the Chikowitz concept as well. Everything's on a horizontal line. Everything is out. The concept of the blow is just like if you look at a string player, the bowling, you don't see the bow come under the chin when they have to play high, and conversely,
Yeah.
Yeah, you start doing that and you start manipulating. Next thing you know, you're trying to figure out what's going. You're up in your head and trying to. No.
Then it snowballs. Well, I'm glad I asked. If we could go on another hour just about those concepts, but we'll leave that for another podcast or in a private lesson with you or a master class, something like that. And I want to turn up the nerd factor one more notch here and talk about equipment. What's in your arsenal in terms of horns and mouthpieces you've used primarily?
Sadly, I don't play anymore. But when I was playing, I wasn't much of an equipment for, I found something that worked and I kind of stuck with it. I started playing on the borrowed cornet, and then I progressed. My very first trumpet was an Olds Ambassador, and then right away my teacher said, "Sorry, Sam, that's my dad. She's outgrown that. She needs a Bach." So I started playing Bach when I was, I don't know, maybe 11 years old.
Wow. And
pretty much stuck with it the entire time. I had a couple of Schilkes, a few Yamahas. Now I wish if I were playing now, oh my God, and your mouthpieces, the equipment, that the options that are available now, sweetheart, it was really different. 65.
Oh yeah.
That my first C trumpet was a Con C, and that was a bow wow.
Ooh. Oh yeah.
I
don't even know if I've seen one of those. I've seen just about everything ever made. I don't think I've ever seen a Con C trumpet.
C trumpet. C, old Con C trumpet. It was a used Con, it was all I could afford at the time, but I managed it until I could. As soon as I started playing with the orchestra and was, making some money, then I bought my C trumpet. But even back in those days, back in the 60s, it took a long time. In fact, the year that I played principal trumpet And this is another thing too. Very few folks really realize I was actually offered the principal spot with the orchestra.
Huh.
I turned it down. Yeah.
Why?
Well, it was the circumstances were such that they had my teacher vacate the principal spot, and they asked me to play for a year. This was with Maestro Shippers. And he had until February 5th of the next year to say yes, no. Well, he offered me the contract in December. But at that point, I had so many other things that I was doing, not the least of which was I was teaching and I was playing. I told you that we had some jazz players in the orchestra. We had our own symphony jazz ensemble. And I knew that if I accepted the principal spot, I would have to give up that. And there was enough in me to know that I'd rather, I was already doing the associate principal job and all the other things. And I thought, no, I think I just want to stay where I am. I'm comfortable doing with what I was doing, teaching and playing, especially the getting the balance, and doing the associate job. I knew my job. And that's what I did. So that's how Phil Collins wound up being hired.
Oh,
that's when we had Tiffany. Yeah.
Wow. Wow, that's fascinating. So you wanted to play in the jazz ensemble,
and there was something in me. There was a very kind of an uncomfortable feeling about how the whole thing went down with the replacement.
Wow.
Yeah, it was just. I just felt like I said I pretty much knew my job, and that's what I felt comfortable doing.
Yeah, fascinating.
Yeah.
Wow. Thank you so much for your time today, Marie.
Well, it's my pleasure. Thank you.
We could go another 3 hours.
He asked to do this. I mean, to be remembered at my age, I really appreciate it.
Well, and I'm embarrassed because now we've been doing this for so long that I haven't had you on sooner. And even though I do this podcast, I'm very introverted and don't talk to people. So, I don't, when folks walk into the shop, I'll throw on a microphone. So that's no excuse because you've been an institution in yourself through your teaching and playing. And so better late than never to have you on. And I'm looking forward to seeing you at IWBC here.
I look forward to seeing you in about a month.
Yeah. So, before I let you go, though, if I could leave you with one last question, and it's always a doozy. If you could leave our listeners with your best piece of advice, what would that be?
Oh, my gosh. But my best piece of advice? Oh, okay. I've got several, but...
Doc Severinsen had 4. So...
Yeah, he's allowed to have 4.
Yeah, so are you. You could have as many as you want.
Especially for young players. Mm-hmm. You only get one shot at a first impression. Make it good.
Wonderful advice. Marie, thank you so much for being on. We didn't get to see Nico.
Should I bring him in?
Yeah, bring him in. We'll do an encore here.
Nico, come here, buddy, come here.
There he is. Yeah. Hi, Nico.
Nico, look. Yeah, so that's Nico.
I love it. Well, there, we've come full circle.
Yes, yeah. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Oh, the pleasure's been all mine. Thank you so much, Marie. A huge thank you to Marie for spending her morning sharing those stories. She's so exuberant, so much energy. I absolutely love Marie. We've had a few guests on previously who studied with Marie and, unanimously say the same thing. And it's one of those things I wish I could have done the interview in person, also with Susan Slaughter as well, because they're both going to be at the upcoming IWBC conference. But I also wanted to help promote the upcoming conference by having them on ahead of time. So either way, it's going to be great to see them in person here in a few weeks and again, a huge thank you to Marie and to Nico, who made an appearance at the very end. If you ever need a motivation to view the podcast, if you're listening on your drive or on your workout, to tune in to our YouTube channel, it's to see Nico, her dog, Nico Speziale, who made an appearance at the end. But so much great information Marie shared. Again, her stories of she said, I played the trumpet. And even though there was adversity and setbacks and things, being called Mario instead of Marie in the newspaper in a review because, no one would expect a woman to be playing in an orchestra, things like that, those kinds of stories. But the way she persevered, didn't let it get her down, and just plugged through her career to have such a legendary career, both in performing and in teaching. That Duke Ellington story was just amazing. And I do have a copy of that print, like we talked about, and it's going to be hanging behind me in future episodes. Not here. This isn't the shop, as you can tell, but it will be hanging behind me in future episodes on the shop. I'm a proud welcome addition to our shop wall. So huge thank you to Marie. Thank you for listening. And we had to shuffle episodes a little bit just because of timing, but we have some wonderful guests coming up as well. As I've mentioned before, we have Liesl Whitaker, we have Eric Baker, we have that panel discussion for the William Adam Trumpet Festival, and some more guests lined up over the summer. So make sure you hit that subscribe button. If you're on YouTube, hit that notifications button as well, that little bell, so you know as soon as a new episode posts. And if you're listening to this in Apple Podcasts or Spotify, hit that subscribe button so the episode automatically downloads every time we post. Of course, the 5-star review means a lot to us. And if you have any guest suggestions, constructive criticism, anything like that, feel free to send it my way, john@bobreeves.com. That's it for now. Let's go out and make some music.